The colonial history of French Indochina. French Indochina cover modern-day Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos, which were under French control for lengthy periods spanning over half a century, right from 1858 to 1954. French dominance of the three region was only threatened by a small local military group which surprisingly was able to lead the three region to a victory against France, only to be exploited again by the Japanese before finally emerging victorious in 1954. This is a brief account of the French Indochina exploration and how the locals were finally able to secure their porous territory once and for all. The 17th century is widely known as the century of travels, adventures and discovery of new lands and sources of revenues. The French-Vietnam relationship probably began during the 17th century with missionaries and explorers making contacts with the locals in the French Indochina regions. In 1887, however, the French seized control of the region and established the French Indochina regions covering modern-day Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. The French originally established the Indochina region to serve as a source of revenue for France's government. High taxes were imposed on local consumption goods like rice, salt and opium. The taxes were high enough and by 1920, contributed over 40% quota of the revenue for the French budget. As local wealth depletes, the French began seeking alternative source of revenue, and this results in the exploration of various metals and cash crops from the three regions. France's conquest of the Indochina region was never stable and was often greeted with various uprisings and protests from some of the aggrieved locals. The participation of some of the Indochinese in the First World War also developed a new way of thinking and ideologies amongst the locals which could not easily be stamped out by the French. As such, France's defeat in 1940 had lots of repercussions, as it could no longer afford to hold on to the now more organized and civilized Indochinese regions. By the 1945, the Indochina region was occupied by the Japanese army as a result of the Nazi-allied French Vichy government, which grants Japan access to Indochina. Instead of liberating the already forming independent nations suppressed by the French, the Japanese sought to exploit them much the same way as the French had done. This resulted in the formation of a new guerrilla fighting force called the Viet Minh. Viet Minh sought to gain its independence from the Japanese by uniting the locals and fighting against the infiltrators. The struggle for independence and freedom from exploitation of the French and Japanese by the Viet Minh would continue through the Second World War in 1945. Soon after the Second World War and following the collapse of the Japanese regime, a party in the northern part of the Indochina region called the Viet Minh, led by the Vietnamese nationalist, Ho Chi Minh, declared Vietnam as an independent nation and assumed power over the newly declared Democratic Republic of Vietnam. The other monarchs in Cambodia and Laos were hesitant, and the French, who sought control over the Indochina region again after the Second World War, soon occupied both areas again, against the wish of the locals. The French then founded the Indochinese Federation, which was to be part of the Greater French Union. The French Union sought to treat the Democratic Republic of Vietnam as an independent nation while providing control over the other regions from the central government in Paris. This soon resulted in a series of conflict between 1949 to 1950, as the locals were only interested in gaining their independence from the infiltrators. The French, in order to retain their holdings, signed a treaty that recognizes Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos as independent and self-governing states within the French region. In reality, however, the leaders of these nations were puppets in the hands of the French government, and real independence did not come to them until 1954. In 1954, the Vietnamese led by Ho Chi Minh defeated the French at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu and was later granted absolute independence. The Geneva Accord of 1954.